Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, which is the first in a new series being offered by Pain Canada. So before we begin, I'd like to offer a land acknowledgement. The standard land acknowledgement for Pain Canada is on the screen, but I also wanted to share a personal acknowledgement as a way of introducing myself. So my name is Ari, and I'm a white non-binary settler. I do not live with pain personally, but I have loved ones who do. I grew up swimming in the waters of the Sioux Nation, now known as the Okanagan Valley. For the past 13 years, I have been developing a relationship with these lands and waters, which have been stewarded since the beginning of time by the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. Thanks to my generous and patient Indigenous teachers, including people in this room, I have realized that the relationship with these lands has been very one-sided. And so, like many of us, I'm on a journey to bring about more reciprocity and balance to this relationship. So it's a great honor to be with you all here today. I wanted to briefly thank our sponsors. So this program has been made possible through the financial support of the CIHR Institute of Musculoskeletal Health and Arthritis, as well as the Partnership for the Engagement of Patients in Pain Research, or PEPR. We hope you'll ask lots of questions and participate in today's webinar. To ask one of our presenters a question, please use the Q&A feature in your Zoom toolbar located at the bottom. Note that we will not read your name out when asking your question. And if you have a technical question or a question for me, please type it in the chat. We will be using the auto-generated closed captioning feature for this webinar. So to view the captions, follow the instructions on screen, depending if you use a desktop computer or a smartphone. Today's webinar is being recorded, and a recording will be available on Pain Canada's YouTube channel in the coming weeks. If you have any questions or need help, please don't hesitate to contact us at education@painbc.ca. And although we could surely spend all day talking about this topic, we are unfortunately constrained by colonial time. So we only have an hour today. This will be the rough agenda. So we'll start with an opening prayer, and then we'll have presentations from Jairus, Elder Kat, Desmond, followed by an audience Q&A. All right, and Desmond, I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to ask you, but I hope you're okay with introducing yourself at the beginning of your presentation. And so without further ado, we will hand things over to Elder Kat. Thanks so much.
Thank you. My name is Wambly Chantuya. I'm a member of Wupti-Wasa Nation up in northwestern British Columbia, and feel very honored to be here today. And thank you, Ari, for entrusting me to lead us in prayer. As I'm praying, fill in the blanks of whatever you call the creator or creative force in your life that we ask for help for. Oh, Tunkasha, Great Spirit, hear my prayer. Thank you for this day. Thank you for this gift of life and hope. I pray that you bring us all help and health and learning, growing, sharing in this endeavor, this webinar. Thank you, and bless all the people that are involved with preparing this and organizing it and showing up for it. Thank you for answering our prayers. Hatmia, Atakwiyas, and all my relations. Oh.
Thank you again. All right, Jairus, take it away.
All right, you got it. So hello, everyone. My name is Jairus Svidrovich. I am Ukrainian on my father's side and Soto on my mother's side. I'm a member of Yellow Quill First Nation, which is on Treaty 4 territory in Saskatchewan in the homeland of the Métis, although I've spent most of my life in Treaty 6 territory in the Métis homelands in Saskatoon. I'm presenting to you and with you today, though, from Takaranto, or the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat peoples, otherwise also known as Treaty 13 territory. I was a former member of the Canadian Pain Task Force. I'm a current member on the National Advisory Committee of Pain Canada, board member of SKIP, or Solutions for Kids in Pain. And my two, or actually three now, of my family members have either lived or currently live with chronic pain. One of them previously with chronic cancer-related pain. I feel like I didn't seek out the pain community, but pain found me. And I'm happy to use my position as a pharmacist and as an assistant professor at the Leslie Dan Faculty of Pharmacy at the University of Toronto, as a professor and as a researcher and as a clinician, to make a difference in the world of pain, particularly as it relates to my own community, Indigenous peoples, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. What I'm sharing with you is just a brief overview of some of the national initiatives that have already happened and are continuing to happen in the area of pain, with a little bit of extra information about pain as it relates to Indigenous peoples and what we have done so far. So the Canadian Pain Task Force, which had a 3-year mandate and is now complete. You can find all of our reports online. We had a wonderful representation of folks from a variety of disciplines, geographical locations, ethnic backgrounds, sexual orientations, gender, etc. And we had 8 members of the core team of the task force, and then a very large external advisory panel. And you can see the names of folks across Canada here. The purplish names are the task force members, and the blue names are the members of the external advisory panel. We did come up with 3 reports that were presented to Health Canada, but of course are in the public domain and fully accessible by anybody. You could just Google them and you will find all of them. Perhaps the one that became the most useful and leads into what I'll be talking about for the rest of my own time is the action plan for pain in Canada. So that was our 3rd and final report. One of the pieces of engagement that we did, particularly as it relates to Indigenous peoples, was something that I helped co-coordinate and run. So we had a really, really wonderful gathering that took place at the Museum for Human Rights in Winnipeg, or Treaty 1 territory, back in January 2020. We had a number of other in-person engagements planned, but of course you all know what happened shortly after January 2020. So we continue to have our engagements in virtual and online ways after that. Each of these were led or co-led by local folks and local elders and done in a good way. People were compensated for their time. We flew them in if they required to be flown in, took into account all accessibility needs, etc. Once we finished all of our engagements and consultations, which was extensive and over the period of a few years, that 3rd and final report that we produced came up with more than 150 recommendations for pain in Canada. They are broken down into 6 themes. The first is enabling coordination, collaboration, and leadership across Canada, improving access to timely, equitable, and person-centered pain care, increase awareness, education, and specialized training for pain, support pain research and strengthen related infrastructure, monitor population health and health system quality, and finally ensure equitable approaches for populations disproportionately impacted by pain, which of course and unfortunately includes Indigenous peoples. You'll find this infographic in our report as well, but you can see, and probably everybody in this participating in this call could recreate this image on their own too, and probably don't need to talk at you, but you all realize the complex requirements to work together in a collaborative way when it comes to pain, preventing pain, diagnosing pain, treating pain, managing pain, educating about pain, etc. And many folks are involved in that. Given, though, the Canadian Pain Task Force was a national entity and under the large umbrella of Health Canada, we had multiple federal groups who we consulted with too. You'll all know that health is run provincially in general, although for First Nations, Status First Nations, and certain Inuit folks are a federal responsibility when it comes to health needs. But given that we were part of the federal entity, we partnered with folks like Statistics Canada, Correctional Services Canada, Health Canada, of course, the Public Health Agency of Canada, Veterans Affairs Canada, Indigenous Services Canada, and also Employment and Social Development Canada. What we talked about was how pain comes up or can come up or should come up and become relevant in each one of their areas. It certainly opened my mind in, like, for example, Statistics Canada. When we met with them, I was like, I think I had too much of my pharmacist hat on at the time, thinking like, what are they going to do for people in pain? But of course, gathering data, how have we gathered that before? What are the diagnostic codes that are used by primary care providers who diagnose their patients with pain? There's been certain changes in diagnostic codes over the year and how we track how many people live with pain, et cetera. So each one of these federal partners had a really big role to play in how we developed the reports. I'm not going to read really any of the pieces on this slide with you, but this slide does summarize some of the recent federal actions and investments of some of these federal groups that I mentioned. And each one of them has either already done a lot or will be doing a lot in the area of pain. And I know that with the more recent inclusion of the chronic pain policy team, them existing within the Health Canada umbrella as well, they continue to have these other entities at an arm's length and working with the federal, provinces and territory groups. Our task force recommendations are very closely tied with other federal health priorities and how pain might fit into those spaces and places, including virtual care, health, human resources, mental health. It's no secret that mental health is very closely tied with people living with pain, not only the individuals themselves, but their family members, caregivers, partners, etc. Substance use and also the overlap too of the opioid epidemic. Pain and the opioid epidemic are separate issues, but certainly there are some overlap in there too. Long-term care considerations, particularly publicly funded long-term care homes, end-of-life care as well, being slightly different, thinking about medical assistance in dying and sometimes also the cancer-related impact of pain management versus other forms of pain. The impacts of COVID-19, absolutely, and we could go on for ages about that, and probably all of you could teach me about that as well. But many different advancements for the better and also some changes for the worse for people living with pain throughout the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Research and surveillance was also considered as it relates to pain, categorizing types of pain, how many people live with pain, age ranges, etc. Labor and employment, and then also disability. We know that persons with disabilities are disproportionately impacted by pain, and pain itself might be a disability as an example. So you'll find task force recommendations related to each and every one of these areas in that third and final report. One of the pieces that I loved being part of, so I already self-disclosed that I am an Indigenous person. I'm a Two-Spirit person as well. I am queer, and I myself live with a disability. So thinking about equity, inclusion, diversity, I enjoyed and appreciated being part of these types of recommendations as well to ensure that all folks are represented and that we don't forget about the intersectionality between various identities and how they impact pain, but also how pain impacts those intersectional identities too. I briefly mentioned there is a still not as new, but quite new chronic pain policy team with Health Canada. They are fantastic folks. Every time I meet with them, I want to say that I want to write to their bosses and brag about how wonderful they are. And that's been consistent throughout the whole pain task force experience as well. You'll all also know Maria Hudspeth and then perhaps Fiona Campbell, who were the co-chairs of the Canadian Pain Task Force, and I felt the same way about them. Such absolutely wonderful people, and this work and perhaps even the chronic pain policy team wouldn't exist without their leadership and mentorship and determination. Pain Canada is one of the outcomes of the many recommendations of the Canadian Pain Task Force. So this is a new entity. We're around a year-ish old, I think now, and it is currently sponsored by Pain BC. So we're very thankful to Pain BC for hosting Pain Canada, at least right now. Pain Canada will create new opportunities for action by connecting people, ideas, organizations, and resources, build capacity to transform pain throughout Canada by mobilizing human and financial resources, and provide a springboard from which people all across Canada can advocate and organize around issues related to pain. The organizational structure was determined through consultation with charitable experts, legal counsel, heads of other national charities and coalitions, and it might even continue to evolve over time. It's informed by a wide range of stakeholders, including a national advisory committee, which I mentioned I am a member of, and also Desmond, who you'll hear from shortly, is too. It is currently under a sponsor model, so supported by Pain BC staff and governed by the Pain BC board, utilizing Pain BC's charitable registration, insurance, and incorporation as well. Similar to the Canadian Pain Task Force image that you saw, this one includes people's photos instead of their names and represents who is on the National Advisory Committee from across the country. And yet again, a really wonderful array of representation of discipline, gender, ethnicity, geographic location, profession, etc. What I really fell in love with right away the first time it was explained to me was the Pain Canada logo. The fallen leaf image is a symbol of the disrupted lives and broken efforts that have characterized pain in Canada. Conversely, we can see that the pieces have the possibility of moving inward, knitting together into cohesive maple leaf form. The various colors mirror the ubiquitous pain scale, but also represent the diversity of experiences, backgrounds, and ideas of people living with pain and the pain community. Some of Pain Canada's initial offerings are listed on this screen, but one of the ones I wanted to specifically highlight was the cultural tailoring and translation related to making sense of pain. And I believe that Elder Kat might mention some of this too, but what a wonderful model of putting ownership of how things run into the hands of community members. So Pain Canada and Pain BC had developed Making Sense of Pain, but offered it up to various communities and said, this is what we have. This is the framework. Here's literal printed resources, for example, for you to use, some money for you to tailor this to your own community in terms of language, in terms of who else might be involved, how and where it's delivered, etc. And that's just wonderful practice in my own personal point of view, to give that autonomy to community, but also while giving them enough resource to be able to get that going in their own community and in their own way. That's everything I have to share with you, and I want the focus to be on both Elder Kat and Desmond, who will take over for the rest of this presentation. Oh, Elder Kat, you are just on mute.
Thanks, Jairus. That was a great overview. Ari, did you need to say anything, or do you want me to just carry on?
You can jump right in.
Okay, I'm jumping. Wow, what a team. I wish you could see all the other faces too. Welcome, everybody. I'm living up in Max, which is in English called Hazelton, BC. It's between Smithers and Terrace, way up north. North enough where we get about an hour and a half of dark every night in the summer. So it's pretty cool. It's good to be home. I just moved home a year ago after being absent for quite a few years, and coming to terms with all the different changes in our nations that kind of echo and reflect a lot of Indigenous nations in the country. Some of them positive and some of them are a little bit chewy, to be honest. COVID has really taken its toll on our our nations, our elders, our knowledge keepers. Just in terms of it has really disrupted the our traditional governance structure is all done in the feast house. And of course, with COVID lockdowns and isolation and everything, those were not taking place. So that's like the parliament in Ottawa being out of term for 3 years. Yeah, so it's been really challenging, and we've lost a lot of our elders and knowledge keepers and language holders at a phenomenal rate. So we have a lot of different sources of our pain right now. A lot of it is cultural, spiritual, ancestral, and also the impact of ecocide around us. Numbers of salmon and everybody that eat them. Yeah. So I am thrilled to have been involved with Pain BC, I think for about 4 years now, coming up 4 years. And I've worked alongside Greg Moore the most, and previously Jen, and awesome team. And now Helena, I've met on the phone so far. And right now we are engaged in a cultural tailoring program for the Making Sense of Pain program. So what that entails, as Jairus mentioned, is we take the Making Sense of Pain program and embed our language and cultural ways of knowing and traditional medicine practices and perspectives and worldview into the framework of MySelf, of Making Sense of Pain. It's really awesome. Been interviewing knowledge keepers and elders for about 4 weeks now. Lots of fun. And it's a bit like herding cats, be honest. There's people that have a fluid sense, a non-binary sense of time. Yeah, I just have one more interview to do, and then I will compile all that information, the cultural information, including all of the protocols around consulting with the knowledge keepers around what are the prioritized information they want me to embed into the Making Sense of Pain program. And then June 6th, we'll be launching our first land-based program, which is really exciting. So we've chosen a site so far. We have youth involved in prepping the site. Last week, Greg and I were laughing because we have challenges in this environment that you would be a bit different than if you were in Surrey or Van. Instead of traffic holding us up, we have things like, oh, these are fresh wolf prints. What do you think we should do about that? Yeah, so the youth are learning more about their environment, how to be in the bush safely, and yeah, just cultural teachings that they've missed out on. Yeah, so that'll be launching June 6th, and we'll be doing cultural practices like purification rites with plants, smudging, but also river rites and calling back spirits, because often when we experience trauma, including pain, our understanding is fragments of our spirit will kind of fly off into other dimensions to get away from the feeling of that trauma. And so our old people know how to call our spirits back. It's very common practice around the world. So the participants will be learning things like that. And we do have full sanction from Wilt Ziwasa, which is our house, to be practicing these things on our territory. And we got all the cultural protocols established before we moved into the colonial protocols with health centers, and we're going to be partnering with the Gitsan Child and Family Services, which is an organization that takes care of kids and families, and looking forward to partnering with them and trying to just establish a relational foundation from which we can do further work in the future together. Yeah, so that's where we're at couple more interviews, and then we launch. Yeah. I'm also really can't stress how awesome Pain BC is and the staffing that I've come to know. Their flexibility, open-mindedness, humility, just and curiosity around cross-cultural issues is just always surprises me in such a positive way. So I hope that spreads across Canada. That'd be awesome. And I've started creating a framework for other nations and villages and communities that want to create the Making Sense of Pain program. They want to go through the cultural tailoring of that program. I'm developing a framework for how does one go about culturally tailoring this program. Because you have to have a sequence, right? And you have to figure out what are the priorities and stuff. So I'm creating a map, and I hope to be able to contribute that across the country, and maybe even North America, just so people have less challenge or are able to successfully meet the challenge of marrying a colonial structure with a traditional cultural structure. Yeah. And I love that work. I love that cross-cultural work. So that's where we're at up north. I think that's all I got to say for now. Thank you. Take it away, Desmond.
Thank you, Elder Kat. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Cook's Gem.
My honor.
Itik, Shidish, Desmond and Squash. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Desmond, and I am coming to you from Vancouver, British Columbia, otherwise the traditional stolen territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam people. And where I am specifically, from the best of my research, the closest settlement to where I live was a place called Kemkemle, which translates to Grove of Maples in the Squamish language. And so that's where I come from today, and I'm honored and blessed to do that. And so my name is Desmond Williams. I am the son of Ike Williams, who was an immigrant here. He was born and raised in the country's small island of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, a southern Caribbean island, very, very small, 8 by 11 miles, just a little volcano. And the energy and culture that my father brought with him was such a blessing in my upbringing. And so that's part of who I am. I'm a second generation immigrant, but on my mother's side, my mom was born and raised Patty Williams, or Patty Carey was how she was raised. She was raised in Surrey, and her grandmother, Sarah Mooney, was born somewhere between Spence's Bridge and Ashcroft in the Inglekutma territory. And later in life, she married a Scottish man. And because of that, she lost her Indian status. And because of that, my grandpa didn't have to go to residential school, but also because of that, my grandpa was not raised on the land, and we were separated from our culture. And so my grandpa, my mother, and myself, we have been working. My grandpa passed away many years ago, but he was the one that started the journey of recollecting and reconnecting to our culture. And so I'm proud to be part of this Indigenous Perspectives on Pain, representing my family. And I'm so proud to be reconnecting with my culture through language and through family. And so thank you for coming to this webinar. I have a lot to share today. And I carry the energy of my ancestors and the many blessings that they gave to me. And they, I believe, are what have carried me through the many difficult times that I've had over the years. And so I'm here today as a representative of many different spaces and places. I'm a patient partner of Pain BC. I'm a person with lived experience. I've had pain almost my entire life. My first memories of pain, I was about 7 years old. I'm also part of the Pain Canada National Access Committee. I'm sitting on the board of directors, and I'm also in the Pepper Project Board of Directors and their leadership committee. And so in my capacity in these very scientific and research focused projects and collectives, I'm somebody who is a person with lived experience. I'm there. My personal experience is my expertise. And some people might say that with all of the science and the research and the data and the numbers, I'm a person that's there to add some more of the human element to the discussions as we bring groundedness back to these discussions. And so that is what I do in collective with these folks in Pain BC, Pain Canada, Pepper Project. But outside of that, I also do work on my own, something called tension trauma release exercises, otherwise known as TRE. And it's a practice that helps people deal with stress, trauma, and pain. And once again, I'm a person who is working in the realm of stress, trauma, and pain, but I'm bringing the human element back into that. It's a movement practice, and it's a practice that helps us reconnect with our nervous system and our physical structure, and allowing our body to express and release tension that's associated from past fight or flight experiences. And so with this practice, it is a practice that helps to deal with pain on the physical level, but also on the emotional, spiritual, and mental level as well. And I give thanks for my teachers for guiding me through this practice, teaching me how to experience it and teaching me how to teach. And I also give thanks for my friend Carl for introducing it to me 9 years ago, just as a random suggestion to help me deal with back pain. And this practice not only has helped me deal with my physical pain, but it really has helped me reconnect with my spirit and my sense of self. And so I really give thanks for that. And it's one of the things that over the years has been the underlying practice that has supported me through engaging in all of these new collectives and projects with Pain BC and Pain Canada. And just taking a moment for a shameless plug, if you are at all interested, check out vibestre.ca. I'm there. I do online classes every Monday, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And, you know, it's something that really can help you to reconnect to your sense of self, whether it is a physical, emotional, mental, spiritual thing that you are looking to reconnect to. And rounding off all the many things that I do, I'm also a stand-up comedian, and I use that as a form of artistic expression. And also it's a vehicle to express my thoughts and feelings. And it's a medium that just helps me feel a little bit better when I express myself through this medium. And with this practice of stand-up comedy, I have talked a lot about pain, a lot about my experiences with racism and being othered in community. And so, you know, it's a very interesting experience being a performer and a presenter when I'm constantly in pain. Many times I'm on stage and I'm a stand-up comedian, but I can barely stand up straight. So it's a little bit ironic. So that is who I am, a little bit about what I do. And now I'm going to tell you a little bit about why I do what I do and why I do so many different things. And so I do all of these many varied things in community. But if you talked to me 20 years ago, I would have told you that I had aspirations of being an athlete. I was going to be going to university to play football or lacrosse or basketball. And, you know, I had hopes and dreams of maybe making it pro one day. I really loved to play. I really loved to run. I loved yelling. I loved directing my teammates. And despite being in an incredible amount of pain all the time from around age 7, I never really let it get me down until about 16 years old. My favorite sport, lacrosse, which is a very rough, physical, full contact sport, just started to hurt too much. Every game started with pain and ended with more pain. And it wasn't something that I talked a lot about other than with my parents. I had bad knees, that was just it. I had bad shoulders, that was just how it was. But as everyone started to get bigger, everything started to hurt even more. And so I actually retired from lacrosse at 17. And I told people, oh, I just don't feel like playing anymore. I've had enough. I've played for 12 years. But really, my shame and my guilt was that I couldn't play anymore because I hurt too much, because it hurt too much to play. I transitioned into playing basketball. Again, my ankles and my knees were just in pain constantly. And in grade 12, I'm not sure what it was that motivated me to do so, but I decided to play football. I was in so much pain already, but I decided, you know what, I'm going to play football because I'm an athlete and I'm strong and I'm really cool. So I'm going to play football. And wouldn't you know it, the last game of the season, I hurt my ankle so bad that I actually had to miss my last basketball season of my high school year, and what would turn out to be my last basketball season ever that I would have available to me. And it's pretty sad that as a youth, I was forced out of sports because of injuries. I was only 17. We see a lot of professional athletes make it to the leagues and then have injuries that take them away, but I didn't even get a chance. And it really affected me in my mental health. And fast forward a couple of years, I dropped out of college twice at this point. I'm working at a warehouse, not playing sports, not doing anything productive with my life. And one day I literally could not get down the stairs. And so I had to call in sick for work. And I decided, I think maybe I'll go to the doctor to see if there's something wrong with me. I don't think this stoic thing is working anymore. And I don't think it's been working for a while now. And so when I was 20, I got diagnosed with something called ankylosing spondylitis. It is an autoimmune condition closely related to rheumatoid arthritis. I had so much pain, such limited mobility, and I was just suffering. And because of that, through the advice of my doctors, I got into pharmaceuticals. Luckily, I never was pushed into the opioids because I know I probably would have really liked it. And who knows if I would be here right now. But I was introduced to what are called biologic immunosuppressants, something that stops the immune function of your body so that your body stops attacking itself, because that's what autoimmune is. And with this little break in pain that I had, I decided, you know what, I think I'm going to join beer league lacrosse. I think I'm going to get back into it. That sounds like a good idea. And wouldn't you know it, after a couple of years, the pain forced me out of this again. And because I was forced out of the one thing that I thought gave me purpose, gave me life, I went very, very deep into depression and a lack of purpose with myself. Had some really dark years. And but I believe that for once in my life, being stubborn actually paid off, because I didn't give up. I kept moving forward, and I was so lucky to be able to find the many practices that were suggested to me and offered to me along the way that have supported me now. And I'm proud to say that also it's now 7 years that I have been off of pharmaceuticals, and I have been supporting myself with natural medicines, with better energy and better intention and care of myself, coming back to myself and reconnecting with myself instead of just trying to stop the issue that was happening. I decided to, dig into some of the source and some of the reasons why I was feeling so bad. And all of these things that I've used to help me bring back to myself, none of them would exist without the communities that embody these things. And so for me, I realized through this whole journey, I was all by myself. I was fighting alone. I was doing it all by myself. And part of it was that's how I decided that I wanted to do it. But as I have been humbled many, many times, I recognize that connection to my community, support from others is really one of the most powerful things that I have gained access to. And so we circle back to Pain BC, Pain Canada. These are collectives that have for many years been focusing on helping people engage, find education and empowerment through their programs, through their many things that they engage us with. And it's so important, I believe, that when we're suffering alone, that we can find something to connect to know that we're not suffering all on our own. It feels like it, but there's other people who are feeling that as well, and other people who maybe have gone through that and have found ways to experience a little bit less pain, a little bit less strife in the experience. And one of the things that has really been on my mind lately, I have had the honor of being a part of some really amazing research projects. I'm a part of some very amazing research projects that are moving forward. And I'm hustling very hard. I'm in pain every day. And part of why I hustle so hard is I refuse to go on to disability. And part of the reason I refuse to go on disability is that what I've witnessed is that many people are forced into a particular socioeconomic bracket when they are on disability. And because of that, their quality of life, their access to services are terrible. And these amazing research projects that I've been a part of recently have also gotten a bunch of funding. That is amazing. It's great. It's so necessary for us to be able to do this research that we're going to be doing to help engage with people with pain, engage with communities that otherwise don't have access to services, don't have their voices heard. But on the other side, I'm also in community with a number of people who are on disability, who deal with chronic pain, who are now considering medically assisted in dying because their quality of life is so low, and they're not considering the MAID services because their pain is so bad. They consider it because the rest of their life is so bad. Their housing, their access to food, their access to services, their ability to move around their communities are so difficult. And now that the medically assisted in dying has been expanded to move into other places, make it accessible for other people, which I believe is a positive thing. It can't be a completely positive thing if we're not allowing people to access these other services that help to enrich their life in general. And so it's something that has really been weighing heavily on me lately, because I am so proud and so honored to be a part of all of these amazing projects that are being funded federally, which shows that the federal government does care about people with pain. But there are people on the ground who are suffering, who are struggling, who are having the most difficult of times being recognized as people, being valued on the most basic monetary level as people, when it's clear that there is some funds available. It is just not being directed to the people who are being researched on. It's being directed to the people who are doing the research. And I think that that is also just kind of a macrocosm of what's happening to all of our people who across the country are in communities that aren't close to city centers, that don't have access to services. Our Indigenous people, how this relates to Indigenous people is that all of my family, all of my Indigenous family that I'm connected to, they're all in pain, physical pain. But there's so much other pain that is inflicted on them because of isolation, because of lack of services, because of lack of care of them as human beings. And I think that the main thing that I'm trying to address in this moment is when it comes to pain, there are so many things that we can do and we are doing about pain, but there is pain in more than just one direction. All four directions can experience pain, from our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And I feel that that is the place that we need to start when it comes to addressing the pain in the Indigenous communities. Is although we do have people in pain and we have people who are struggling with addiction because they're in pain, all of those things relate to the pain in all of the other directions as well. And so that is where I believe that we should start. And that's where I'm going to end my talk today. So thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to my story. And I hope that at some point it inspired something for you to maybe ask questions, dig in deeper to what it is that you are experiencing physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, and seeing if the people that you're in community with may need help in those spaces as well. So thank you. Cook's Gym.
Thank you so much, Desmond. I feel like if this were an in-person event and we were all able to gather together, I feel like I would hope that there would be a standing ovation, because I feel like that's how I feel right now, is that all of you are deserving of a standing ovation. Thank you. Just seeing all the reactions and the hearts and the clapping hands in the chat. I think everybody agrees. We do still have some time for questions. So if you have a question for any of our presenters, please feel free to put it in the chat and I will read it out anonymously. And I have a question just to kind of get us started. I was curious, as I think all three of you were speaking, and maybe Jairus and Desmond, you can speak to this more specifically. You talked about how how in kind of the development of the National Pain Task Force and the reports, that there was a lot of engagement with Indigenous communities across the country. And you also spoke about making sense of pain and the cultural tailoring work. I wondered if either of you could comment on kind of future maybe planned engagements with Indigenous people, or maybe some of the research projects that you were mentioning, Desmond. What can we kind of expect to see from Pain Canada and the chronic pain team?
Okay, well, Jairus, if you don't mind, I'll jump in. So one of the things that I'm most excited about when it comes to the PEPPER project, the Project for Engagement of Equitable Research, is one of the sub-projects. There's several projects that are coming out of the PEPPER project, but one of them is the project on the two-eyed way of seeing. And so this is a project where in community, mainly in BC, from what I understand at the moment, we are going to be pursuing literature and more information on how to integrate Western medicine and Indigenous ways of knowing in well-being. And so this is part of the 5-year project. There is a lot of money behind it. And I'm excited about it because it really is not only a way that we'll be able to speak to communities in a more understandable way, because instead of bringing the medical jargon, we can bring in the understanding. And just to put it in short, the thing that I love about this the most is that we call it Western medicine and Indigenous ways of knowing. These aren't theories. These aren't, you know, these are things that we know that are true, that have been passed along for generations from the beginning of time. And so having those perspectives and those understandings and ways of knowing incorporated into our advanced understanding of Western medicine, I believe is going to be so powerful. And yeah, the potential for what that means moving forward from the PEPPER project is very exciting for me, because once we take that across the country and incorporate that into, you know, different communities, hopefully with more resources that will be able to support those communities as well, it will be more inspiring for people to engage with services to help with their well-being, because I know that just from a personal perspective, engaging with colonial structures when it comes to well-being, I have major barriers. I've had a lot of trauma and a lot of negative experiences, and oftentimes it's either the people who are bringing it to me or the language that they use in order to try to present this information to me makes me feel like it's not anything that has anything to do with me. And so if we're able to bring perspectives from a more grounded and land-based understanding, I think that a lot more people will be willing to engage in healthcare services that will enrich their life, that otherwise they wouldn't feel encouraged to engage with.
The only other part that I will add is that although there's much more than what I could possibly share, one particular way that I'm part of something that Pain Canada is leading is even setting up other organizations. So for example, Maria Hudspeth has been meeting with a few of us here in Ontario and helping us set up a new entity called Pain Ontario. And through Pain Ontario, we will have our own engagement with Indigenous peoples living with pain, for example. And through Maria and Pain BC and Pain Canada's leadership to, helping so many other entities that already exist across the country in doing their own work. It doesn't all have to be done by Pain BC or Pain Canada, but can be facilitated by, uplifted by, and then even folks who are part of each of these organizations in their own research programs, community-based organizations, they're doing their own engagement, their own work. So another role of Pain Canada, Pain BC, and other groups is to uplift and share and like propagate, what's working and all the good success stories across the country.
Great, thank you so much. And a person in the Q&A had the same question that I did. Elder Kat, would you be able to tell us a little bit more about the framework that you're developing?
Sure, be happy to. I would use the analogy of creating a loosely woven basket in which to collect our berries. So the loosely woven basket is a structure that can be applied across the board to any nation, because the culturally specific practices and protocols and laws can be embedded and inserted into the basic framework. So because that's part of the biggest challenge, is how do we create a culturally authentic, integral program that's married with a colonial structure and understandings, and also worldviews around what is health and where does pain come from. Through our Indigenous model, medicine model that I've been trained in, there's so many. There's at least 13. And I don't think it's a finite list either. There's at least 13 different aspects of our lives lead and inform our health, but also our pain, loneliness, despair, depression, isolation. All those things are really, really big factors in opioid use and misuse, but also in our pain. So my experience and my training as a traditional Indigenous medicine person, reclamation of language, culture, relationship to Mother Earth and Creator, our relationship to the Creator, that's the basis and that's the foundation of healing. Not just managing our pain, not just tolerating our pain, but healing it and asking the powers, the creative powers, whatever we call those in the universe, to come and help us. And reinstating those ceremonies and medicine practices that actually heal the body, mind, spirit, emotions, and also ancestors. And that's what I'm most excited about, is creating a framework by which anybody in Canada or Brazil or New Zealand can take that framework, and it's a basis from which they can marry their own authentic cultural worldviews, perspectives, and ways of knowing. It's like half the battle is done before you have to sort of jump out of the gates. Yeah, so I'm pretty excited about that. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think we are all very excited to see, that the result of that good work.
Yeah, I can see I've got some really good partners in crime here. We collaborate and have great fun. Thank you both for Desmond and Jairus and Ari, for this opportunity to share and learn and grow. Help me.
Thanks,
All
Jen.
right, I think we have time for one more question. Okay, someone asks, I'm wondering if Pain Canada is currently doing some projects that get a sense of the experiences with pain for individuals who have intersecting identities, for example, being queer and Indigenous.
I wish I could answer the current piece, but admittedly, this last term of teaching for me, all of my labs have landed on every Pain Canada meeting day. So I'm not the most up to date on what's been discussed in the last few months, but I do know that Maria specifically and many other folks who are part of Pain Canada, this is at the top of their radar constantly, and certainly my own. So loosely and broadly speaking, yes, but right now I can't specifically comment on like a name of a particular program.
No worries. Okay.
I have a question.
Oh, yes, please.
The frameworks for the research, is it all colonial structure or has it been married into the Indigenous worldviews? For Pain Canada? Does that make sense?
I mean, if I was to wager a guess, I would say very much still in the colonial structures.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's about it. It's yeah, very much research oriented. A lot of really great people who are involved in really great things, but we definitely don't bring a lot of Indigenous perspective to the Access Committee in its structure. So I appreciate that question because I would like to look into that a little more as well.
That's pretty exciting, hey? Thank you.
Great question. Okay, I think we will end it there, folks. Thank you again so much for spending an hour with us, whether it is your noon hour or in the middle of your workday. Just so much gratitude for this, for listening, for paying attention, and for your great questions. Like I said, this will be recorded, and a recording will be posted on the Pain Canada YouTube channel in a couple of weeks. So please look out for that, and please share the link with anyone who would be interested. And we'll leave it there. Thank you again, and we hope to see you at the next webinar, which will be on June 15th.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of your day.